You're listening to WPEA 90.5 FM Exeter. This is Big Red Radio, School of Athens. I'm Aavik Wadivkar.
I'm Charlie Scales.
And I'm Carter Otis.
Yes, and today that was Charlie actually that you heard a little earlier, mimicking the sounds of what we will be studying today.
Human nature.
Human nature. What he said.
Right? Anyway, human nature.
Human nature. So, Charlie, let's just get right into it. Let's just kick us off. I mean, no beating around the bush. No, what are other phrases for beating around the bush?
No forging around the berries.
No forging around the berries. That's a good one. Yeah.
It's not though.
Let's that what it said. No forging around the berries. No.
What are we saying?
No home. No.
Charlie, bring us to the text, would you?
Okay. All right. We're going to be looking at Hobbes and Rousseau. You might be getting flashbacks if you graduated college and you did anything related to politics. Thomas Hobbes wrote in 1651 a book called Leviathan. This is in the midst of the English Civil War. And he basically is founding this idea that early human life, without states, without any governmental hierarchy, was nasty, brutish, and short. Because, according to him, human nature was inherently violent, that these people, these hypothetical people, lived in a constant state of war. And such a war, as I'm quoting now, such a war is as is of every man against every man, without a common power to keep them all in awe. So he's basically arguing for supremacy of the state, of the government, over our brutish impulses that would drive us to perpetual conflict. So this is, one of the founding documents of English political theory, and he's basically just saying that the state is the supreme entity, and without the state, we would all be living in a constant state of conflict. And, he's basically taking, what he's seeing around him in the English Civil War, a brutal, brutal conflict, and he's, extrapolating it and using it as kind of a way to imagine what it must have been like without the state, without the, original supreme entity that controls and tempers our impulses through law. So, moving on from that, we have Rousseau. In 1755, publishing an essay in an essay contest called The Discourse on the Origin of Inequality, which was disqualified from the essay competition by exceeding the word limit and not focusing on the question asked. However, since it has been widely acclaimed as, a very important political document just because of the arguments he makes. And basically what he says is, and I quote from here, "The first man who, having enclosed a piece of ground, bethought of himself of saying, 'This is mine,' and found people simple enough to believe him, was the real founder of civil society. From how many crimes, wars, and murders, from how many horrors and misfortune might not have saved mankind by pulling up the stakes or filling up the ditch and crying to his fellows, 'Beware of listening to this impostor. You are undone if you once forget that the fruits of the earth belong to us all, and the earth itself to nobody.'" And, Rousseau's basically saying in this entire essay that human nature at the, dawn of humanity was Edenic. It was a childlike, innocent state where everyone was egalitarian in small bands until someone set up agriculture and someone said, "This is mine, that is thine, and we are separate, entities, and I will fight over it." So it's basically the inverse to Hobbes. But importantly, it is kind of drawing upon this idea of a noble savage, quote unquote, noble savage, that was being perpetuated in the media of the time based on the interactions of Europeans with Native Americans, seeing how easy it was for Europeans to run away into the woods to join the natives, and how the converse never happened once. So he's basically saying that the noble savage is always living in harmony with nature and without the vices of modern society, without the inequality that drives civilization, and hence the technological improvement that comes with said inequality, or what he thought necessitated civilization. So basically, those are the two documents I'd be liking. I want to dive into today, and more than just that, I want to understand how both are wrong and why there is no one monolithic, quote unquote, state of nature, as Rousseau and Hobbes seem to suggest, and that there are several reasons and examples why looking for one is futile. So, initial thoughts.
Okay. Well, so yeah, Charlie, you've given us two just competing philosophical views, right? About, is it just about man, just like man's nature inherently, or specifically about early man, like the savage, right? Because they both use the word savage.
Right. And I think that it's fair to assume that by talking about the human nature, they are calling upon the early man and saying and imagining what life must have been like for some early man. Hypothesized early man, importantly.
So by that token, if they, you say that, hey, human nature flip-flops, but you're saying that they believe that human nature is one thing. And so if we were to drop like a modern human into savagery, I suppose they would revert to that kind of nature.
I'm not really sure what you mean.
Basically, Charlie, if I threw you into the Amazon, would you become, if I threw you and like 10 other people into the Amazon, would you all become brutish savages or noble savages?
Right, and this is where we get into the territory distinguishing the imagined state of nature, quote unquote, with what we actually observe through anthropology and what we actually observe in the archaeological record. And that's what I really want to talk about is what can we truly say about human nature, and does it even exist? And also, what are the implications for contemporary politics?
Okay, so fair enough. Contemporary politics is an interesting one. Carter, you're going to have to carry us on that. But yeah, Carter, your thoughts? What do you got?
I'm interested. I don't know. I say we talk through these thinkers one by one, and I don't know. Hobbes. We read portions of his Leviathan in a class I'm taking, Violence, War, and Peace. And yeah, I think his environment that he's living in has a large effect on what he's writing, right? He's living in this time of, it's the English Civil War, so there's a lot of brutality going on, and he's really trying to argue that it's human nature to be chaotic. It's human nature to want everything around you. And it's kind of contrary to other thinkers, which I can get into in a second. But for me, it kind of relates to like the Christian concept of original sin, right?
Right?
That humans are born sinful, or, in Hobbes' case, that they're born greedy, right? When you're born, you want to take as much as possible, as much land as possible. So, in Leviathan, he goes on to justify saying, that all wars are just, right? Because really it's just people being people. They're sad and they're unfortunate and they're tragic, but that's just life, right? People are going to people are going to be savages. They're going to want to take as much land as they can, and that's just what wars are. People aren't satisfied with what they have, so they take more. But otherwise, that's life.
That's actually kind of interesting that he correlates human nature with what is moral, or I suppose right? Because that's justification that, hey, just because we're naturally affined towards, naturally precluded towards this behavior, that means that all wars, Carter used the word just. Is that what, like, he actually, connected it with the concept of justice?
Yeah. So give me 1 sec. I'll find the document.
Of course, yeah. No, in the meantime, like that's pretty interesting that he would just automatically connect, hey, this is normal human nature, to therefore it must be just, right? Because humans are automatically just, I guess. Because I don't know, that's kind of interesting, because I feel like he would take the opposite stance of, hey, human natures are inherently unjust, right? Because if we're talking about human nature is to be selfish, right? To be selfish is generally thought of as unjust, but then he sounds like, hey, whatever is natural is automatically just, like justice is derived from our nature, and therefore war, if we just naturally get into war, we naturally are just.
Right. So, and this is Leviathan that Charlie was talking about. So he says, to this war of every man against every man, this is also consequent, that nothing can be unjust, The notions of right and wrong, justice and injustice have there no place. Where there is no common power, there is no law. Where there is no law, no injustice. Force and fraud in war are the two cardinal virtues. Justice and injustice are none of the faculties neither of the body nor the mind. If they were, they might be in a man that were alone in the world, as well as his senses and passions. They are qualities that relate to men in society, not in solitude. It is consequent also to the same condition that there be no propriety, no dominion, no mine and thine distinct, but only that to be every man's that he can get, and so for so long as he can keep it. So basically, right, that law works fine in society, right? In a city, you have laws. People follow the laws. If they don't follow the laws, they're held to a higher authority, right? The police come, if you're holding a party that's too loud, the police come and they say, stop the party. And then if it gets worse, there are more repercussions, right? But there's some higher authority you have to answer to. He's saying that nation states don't have that higher authority. They're just kind of in a vacuum with each other, right? That if one of them does something unjust, there's nothing the others can do other than fight back. So he's saying that because of that, and because people naturally want to expand, want to take as much as they can, that what is yours is whatever you can keep. Whatever you can hang on to belongs to you, and justice and injustice shouldn't have a place in war.
Right, and importantly, he's saying that there is no, and this is where he extrapolates it to the early man thing, where he's saying that when there is no higher authority to answer to, everyone is just doing whatever they can to get as much as possible and fighting each other in a perpetual state of war. And then he kind of brings that up into the modern era where he says, or his modern era, I guess, 1651, our early modern era, where, war is the only way to decide things. And there is no Geneva Conventions. There are no rules of war. It is just whatever you can do to get your objective.
Okay, so that seems like it's interesting, like cross between utilitarianism and Ayn Rand, maybe. Quick question that I had percolating in the back of my mind, and now it has escaped me. So I no longer have this quick question. It is gone. In the meantime, hold on. Let me cook for a second. I swear.
No. Here, I can continue. As Charlie was talking about, like the Geneva Convention, right? That Hobbes goes on to talk about like this type of covenant, right? Which is kind of like a law, or as he continues, sort of something like a UN. But he's saying that we can only hold people to account in war if there's some sort of covenant or there's an agreement, right? If we can say you broke this law, then we can start to say that's unjust because we had a society around it, right? Like if you break a treaty, that can be unjust because you were starting to form a society with laws and stuff. But if you didn't, then it's kind of just, you're assuming you're not going to get invaded. And then there's no real hard law broken. So.
Okay. Interesting. But then what does, by the way, I remembered my question. I remembered what was percolating.
Please.
God.
Right?
God, right? So we're talking about higher authority, and I feel like especially in the hegemony that he's in right now, which is England, in the 15th, 17th century?
They weren't hegemons yet. This is before hegemony.
This is before hegemony? Oh, my bad.
Well before hegemony. It wasn't until Victorian era.
Hobbes was born 1588 and died 1679 at age 91, which seems quite remarkable.
In that case, I'm entirely I'm using hegemony in the social philosophy sense.
Okay.
Of Christian hegemony rather than a national hegemony.
Right, okay.
Sorry, so phenomenology. No, actually, no, that's a different thing. Actually, no, maybe it's not. Christian phenomenology, sure. Point is that I don't know. Does Rousseau, or no, this is Hobbes. Does Hobbes say anything about God as a higher authority? Because he talked about I feel like mentioned something about morality coming from being afraid of consequence being visited upon you by a higher authority, and morality only being able to be, enforced by a higher authority. But the thing is, his higher authority seems to stop at, the nation state or the state period. Does his higher authority reach all the way out to God? Because it made me, reminded me of this common conversation that I always hear atheists say when they're talking about how cool atheism is, where Christians are like, how do you know what's good or bad without religion? And atheists, because they're so cool, right? You guys, they're like, if you need God to be a good person, then you're not a good person, which kind of, I just don't like how self-righteous they are about it. I say this as one, but my point is that, hey, so Hobbes is essentially saying morality is completely subjective, and humans have no inherent morality. Humans are inherently, but then by definition, morality should be, what's the word? Not disabled. I don't know. Does Hobbes make any claims as to what ought to be the state?
Well, so talking about God, he does say this. So he says, so basically like the party example that I had before, right?
Yeah.
If you have a party and the police come, you've signed a covenant or a law or something like that with the police so that, implicitly as a member of society, that if you violate the law, you will face the repercussions of it, right? So you make a covenant with law enforcement. And Hobbes goes on to say that, quote, to make a covenant with God is impossible, but by meditation of such as God speaketh to, either by revelation supernatural, or by his lieutenants that govern under him, and in his name. For otherwise we know not whether our covenants be accepted or not, and therefore that they vow anything contrary to the law of nature, vow in vain, as being a thing unjust to pay such vow. And if it be a thing commanded by the law of nature, it is not the vow, but the law that binds them. So basically, you make an agreement with someone else in your society that you'll follow said rules, right? And you write it down, you have a piece of paper somewhere. You can't do that with God. You can't make an agreement with God, right? We think we know what we think we know, but Hobbes is saying God only communicates through revelations or through prophets. And so you can't really know if you make an agreement with God. You can assume, but people interpret that differently. There are different prophets and whatnot and different revelations that different people have that can vary the word of God. So as much as it'd be nice to say, oh, we have like the boss man up in the sky and he'll tell us what's right and wrong, Hobbes is like, that's not really practical.
As much as I would love to get into this more, I think we should maybe go back to the early human thing, because at the end of the day, he's making the argument that early humans are inherently violent. But we'll get right to that after this break.
Solid segue. Thank you very much, Charlie.
You're welcome.
We apologize for the interruption. Anyways, welcome back. This is School of Athens. You're listening to WPEA 90.5 FM Exeter. I'm Aavik Wadivkar.
I'm Charlie Scales.
And I'm Carter Otis.
All right, thank you very much. Now, we left off Charlie bringing us all the way back to what Hobbes was saying about early humans. So, Charlie, where do we go next? Are we still talking about Hobbes? Are we talking about Rousseau? What's going on? Are we disproving Hobbes?
Well, we're talking about Hobbes and Rousseau at the same time, because both of them are making the assumption that there is a state of nature. And I would like to bring us to the Arctic Circle.
Please.
The Inuit. I'm sure many people know the Inuit. During the summer, the Inuit gather in large igloos. Sorry.
Go on.
Not funny. Large igloos and in egalitarian bands. Basically, extended family groups, and everyone knows each other, and it's all jovial. There's no hierarchy. There is no sort of bureaucracy. I don't know, division of power. There is only joviality. Everyone having a good time. On the converse, in the winter, they suddenly decide to break up into small bands and wander about hunting. And then, all of a sudden, they form what could be called kingships, tiny, tiny kingships, where the patriarch wields ultimate authority over his constituents and completely has complete authority to beat them, kill them, or direct them to do whatever he wants them to do in the name of hunting, in the name of survival. But then the next summer, yet again, everyone goes back together, and all semblances of that hierarchy and violence and brutishness and nastiness completely dissolves. What do you guys think about the implications of this for the state of nature? And we can go into more examples soon.
I don't know. I mean, to me, it seems very pessimistic. I don't know. The idea that, like, people are born evil, or, people are born, like, that Hobbesian idea that, I mean, I don't know. I think part of the trouble discussing these things is they're so hard to justify or verify, right? I can say people are born evil and point to a bunch of people who are evil and talk about how they were born evil. And if I say people are born good, I can talk about, like, good people or even average people and say, look, they were born good. But I mean, to me, I don't know. This whole field just seems so difficult to talk about because I feel like it's just, conjecture or philosophy without any, empirical data. And I get that it's a philosophy show, but I wanted to bring that up.
And so there we go right there, because you just touched on the key point that I've been trying to make without any idea of how I'm going to get there, that people are not born good or evil, but that they imagine the way they want to live. They imagine their socio-political organizations and change accordingly. Now, I want to bring you to bonobos. Bonobos, once they reach troops of 150, which is known as Dunbar's number.
What are bonobos?
Bonobos are apes closely related to chimpanzees. They're, along with chimpanzees, are closest related relatives
to us.
To us, yes. It's very similar to chimpanzees. You might as well say chimpanzees, but I'm going to say bonobos because that's whatever. So when you get to 150, they break off and start warring with each other, and they don't have any control over what socio-political organization they have. On the other hand, humans are imaginative, curious selves. We have the capacity to imagine. We have the capacity to experiment and change consciously, politically consciously, our organization, our social organizations. So to say that there would be, one, monolithic state of nature in which everyone is egalitarian and there's small bands that are hunter-gatherers that just run around and do things in kind of a haze until one of them says, hey, this is mine. That's ridiculous, because why would any human, anatomically modern human, which have been around for 300,000 years, why would they ever just continue in a haze without imagining what kind of other political organizations could take place? And we see this, in Inuit that I just eliminated, and additionally, in the Comanche of the Great Plains of North America, there was this pattern during one part of the year where there were policemen during the Great Buffalo Hunt, and they would kind of take up the mantle of policemen and, beat people, kill people, direct people in certain ways, and enforce law. But then all of a sudden, when the buffalo hunting was over, there were no policemen anymore, and everyone would go back to being equal. So basically what I'm trying to say is that people imagine and people want to, change their political organizations all the time. And it's constantly what we're doing. We're discussing these things. It is what makes humans special, our capacity for imagination. So I'm basically just saying that Hobbes and Rousseau are wrong.
Equally wrong, you would say? That any kind of conjecture or guess that this is what human nature, that's always wrong?
Well, I would just say that any sort of imagination about what quote-unquote early man or quote-unquote savagery is like is shockingly underestimating the capacity for human experimentation. And it's actually more boring than what's actually taken place in human history, which is the conscious political experimentation over eons untold.
Interesting. So is there no way to predict how people will act then? People will act according to what they would like? There's no way to guess at this?
I wouldn't say according to what they would like. I mean, we're currently stuck in a political organization that we have been in for, I don't know, upwards of 3,000 years, maybe 4,000. Quite a long time.
You're saying we've had the same political organization for
a long time. Look, I mean, look at it. Like,
And that political organization is
strictly
like democracy?
hierarchical.
Okay.
It's stratified. I mean, even in so-called the quote unquote American Revolution, the people who were at the top stayed at the top, and it's been pretty much stratified since. I mean, you could say there's been increased social mobility, but so has it been in Europe. It's just been a change in technology and a change in the marketplace dynamics. What really is, underlying all these political changes is the fact that there are people at the top organizing everything, and there are people at the bottom. There's harsh inequality throughout, which Rousseau says is natural. That is civilization. That is when the first farmers put up a fence, put up a palisade, and said, "This is mine. You can't take it from me." They are setting in motion what we would call civilization. They are enacting the original sin of inequality, and as Rousseau said, rushing headlong towards their chains. What we actually observe in the archaeological record is that after the dawn of agriculture, for about 4,000 years, villages largely remained villages and proceeded apace with technological developments such as the plow, leavened bread, beer, chariots, advanced metallurgy, math, astronomy. And not only that, but as populations boomed and became cities, they were strikingly unstratified. And we hesitate to call this civilization because there were no bureaucracies, there were no kings, there was no state. It was egalitarian. And I mean, even north of the Black Sea in the modern-day country of Ukraine, there were cities of thousands of people, about 6,000 years ago, organized in concentric rings of houses, and space in the middle for town council and celebration, and this lasted 800 years with nothing resembling hierarchy. And so both are wrong in their own ways, because Hobbes is saying that, that early man is nasty, brutish, and short. Early man's life is nasty, brutish, and short, because there's no law. When in fact we see that humans make laws for themselves all the time. They even switch up their laws midway through the year. And on the other hand, Rousseau is saying that humans stumbled upon inequality without thinking about it. But what we really see is that, there's no such thing as a noble savage or a brutish savage. But really, the thing we should be combating is the stupid savage, the savage that doesn't imagine its political configuration being a different way and act accordingly.
Interesting. I hear what you're saying about what we're constituting as civilization or civilized people. But I guess in a more modern context, I mean, you have entire fields like consumer marketing, for example, right? And their whole job is to predict what people will do or what choices they'll make. And I mean, it's reasonably successful, right? I mean, we see a lot of advertisements and stuff like that. And those advertisements are trying to get at our human nature or trying to predict how we'll act according to some imaginary law. So what do you say to those fields? Are they just, continually getting lucky or what?
I would say that's more psychology than it is human nature. I think what I'm trying to get at here is political organization, that there should be no concept of a correct political organization. I mean, a unitary direction of history where, small hunter-gatherer bands, and I could break that down further. Small hunter-gatherer bands is itself a misconception of early prehistory. Small hunter-gatherer bands goes into agricultural societies, goes into stratified cities, bureaucracies, inequality, and stays that way forever, because that's just the way things are. I think that, in terms of contemporary consumer, relationships with, marketing, it's more that's psychology. It's like, we know what makes you tick. We know what you want. I don't know. I think it's a little different.
Wait, so now I'm less clear. What's the difference between human nature and psychology?
Well, I just don't. I think that when you, I'm not sure. Well, because I don't know. I don't know how we got there. I don't know if I understand.
Well, I mean, I think it's, Carter, you brought up psychology, and then Charlie, you're like, wait, hold on, that actually, psychology as a subject is more about, is less about like inherent human nature, at least savage human nature. So I think it's the idea that psychology, perhaps as a subject, doesn't necessarily apply to savages, right? I mean, yeah.
Right. That's the idea is why we don't try and apply psychology to like animals or things like that, right? Because we say they're not of high enough caliber of intelligence to understand morality.
Come on, don't
right?
do your dog like that.
Like we say, like like if an animal kills another animal, like that's nature, right? That's life. That's normal. But if humans kill other humans, that's bad because we understand a higher concept of morality, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
Wait, say that one more time.
So animals can kill animals because that's nature, right? But humans shouldn't kill humans because that goes against a moral compass that we have.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. I suppose that's it, right? I mean, okay. Are we saying that psychology? Sorry, how did we even get here?
I don't know. I think it's a little different. I think marketing is like targeting our primal like instincts. Like red is blood and green is like happiness.
Sorry, marketing? What?
Marketing. Yeah.
Oh, psychology. Okay. Sorry, I'm the brain is not making the connections, which is ironically what the brain is supposed to do, right?
Yeah, pattern seeking. I was babysitting a kid today, and he pointed at one thing, and he was like bug, and then he pointed at another thing, and he also said bug. I was like, what? How did you make that connection?
And
How did you know?
They were both bugs? Both of the
They were
things
both bugs. They were
Wow.
the exact same picture, and he recognized that they were the exact same picture.
That is crazy.
Actually insane. He's going through a development. He's going to become a fully fledged person capable of reason.
That is, it's actually so entertaining to be with children like that.
I know.
I have younger cousins, and I was going for a walk with them, and it was just repeated questions. Like, what's this? What's this? No, and what's this? And I answer them, and then the next walk is like that's a tree. That's a tree. That is an elevator. I was like, wow. So yeah, human brain does function, right?
Yeah, y'all know when a kid says something funny like the past tense of verbs, like past tense of most verbs, you add just like ed at the end, like walk is walked. And
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And yeah, so they'll say like I throwed up, or like I ran. Or no, I run.
Right, I swim.
And it's like,
yeah.
And we're like, oh, you're so cute. You're so like small and stupid, and you're so funny and cute. And like, no, their brains are making the connections. Like, they deserve respect for that stuff, right? They're making conclusions. It's not their fault that the English language just sucks in terms of consistency, right?
Yeah.
Like grammatically. Yeah. Human, it goes crazy. The neurons, they connect, they fire. It's wild actually. Just learn this in psychology. You have less connections in your brain, like neural connections in your brain now than you did like 10 years ago.
What?
Yeah. This is specifically for the 3 people in this room, because we are adolescents and we are going through adolescence. That's interesting. We are adolescents and we're going through adolescence, and essentially during adolescence, your 2 things happen, right? There's gray matter and there's white matter in the brain, colloquially named. And essentially, as you're going through adolescence, neurologically, what happens is, for the first 10 years of your life or so, your brain just makes a bunch of connections, and just generates more and more connections and more pathways. But then when you go into adolescence, your brain's like, all right, time to optimize, time to figure out what you're going to be like for the rest of your life and whether you're addicted to drugs. And then as you go through life, it starts pruning those connections, right? And so the gray matter, which is the neurons that have been generated, the gray matter actually decreases, right? As your brain optimizes more and more connections as you build better and better habits. And not only that, but then it starts building up white matter. And white matter is essentially myelination. And what that is so you have a neuron and it sends a signal from one side to the other side through essentially a tunnel. And myelination is a coating on the outside of the tunnel that makes the signals travel even faster.
What?
Right? So crazy stuff. You are losing neurons at this moment. How do y'all feel?
I'm feeling dumber. than I did 10 years ago.
10 years ago? Is that how you felt 10 years ago?
I felt more like this. Hold on.
Okay, we will hold on. Anyways, we will continue holding on. Carter, how are you feeling?
I was looking and I finally found what you were talking about. So this is the WUG test, if you're familiar with this.
The WUG test. Oh, yes.
So it's something that social experimenter Jean Berko Gleason. It was an English language test given to children, and so it has a little illustration of what could be called a bird, maybe, and it has the caption, "This is a WUG," and then there's another illustration with two of them. It says, "Now there's another one. There are two of them. There are two blank," and the child is supposed to fill in the blank. And so the children naturally say WUGs, right? There are two WUGs, even though WUG is not a word that they have encountered or will ever encounter. And so there's other examples of this, right? This is a dog with quirks on him. He's covered in quirks. What kind of dog is he? He is a blank dog, and the answer is quirky, right? This is a man who knows how to spow. He is spowing. He did the same thing yesterday. What did he do yesterday? He blank. He spowed, right? And so even though these are fake words, as kids, we learn to recognize these patterns, right? Nice. So, when the kids make these simple little mistakes, it's like, whatever they're learning. But really, it is fascinating seeing that they're taking words that are completely new to them and applying our linguistic systems to them.
Right, exactly. I mean, realistically, she quirk on my WUG till I spow, right? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What he said. We'll be right back after this short break.
Excuse me, sir. Can you tell me what SIPC is?
SIPC? Isn't that, no.
Miss, can you tell me what SIPC is?
SIPC. Don't tell me. Okay, tell me.
It's the Securities Investor Protection Corporation, an investor's first line of defense in the unlikely event a brokerage firm fails. It's there when real people need help.
Like me.
And me.
And you. Visit www.sipc.org.
With the home foreclosure crisis upon us, vacant properties and deserted houses are changing the landscape of our neighborhoods. These deserted houses attract vandals, thieves, and con artists. In times like these, keeping your neighborhood safe is more important than ever. When foreclosures rise, so can crime. Uncut lawns, trash, and empty driveways are open invitations for crime. Empty homes make perfect locations for drug dealers. Squatters find vacant houses, move in, and take over. Teenagers use abandoned homes for parties and to vandalize. To combat these new threats, urge your community association to work with local police to patrol vacant homes. Contact your city, county, or housing authority to cut overgrown lawns and pick up trash. Report broken windows and doors to the police and educate your child that it is not okay to go into an abandoned house. To learn more about protecting your neighborhood, visit ncpc.org or contact your local law enforcement agency.
A message from the U.S. Department of Justice, National Crime Prevention Council, and the Ad Council.
And we are back. You're listening to WPEA 90.5 FM, Exeter. This is the School of Athens. I'm Aavik Wadivkar.
I'm Carter Otis. So in our last little bit of our radio show here, we'll recap what we went over today, what the takeaways are, and what people are meant to do.
What people ought to do, almost.
Even.
What ought they do?
So we began by talking about Thomas Hobbes and his written piece Leviathan, where he characterized man as originally sinful, a brutish savage, and said, all wars are just because there's really no morality that you can apply to them.
Right. And then we moved on to Rousseau, where we talked about his essay, his discourse on the origin of inequality, where he talked about the concept of a noble savage. That is someone who said that, hey, these savages were actually the people who saved mankind in a way by creating society, and that and that noble savages live in harmony without nature, and that modern society has vices that the noble savage avoids. And he talked about, Native Americans and Englishmen becoming Native Americans, but that never occurring the other way. And then Charlie, I think you brought up a couple of examples from the real world.
Yeah, so basically just to talk about how...
Go on.
To talk about how the idea that there is one unitary state of nature is actually fundamentally flawed by forgetting to account for the fact that humans are inherently curious and inherently imaginative about the way they live and their political organization, and that they are more prone to experiment and change the way they live than to just get stuck in one way for the rest of time, as Hobbes and Rousseau would say, whether it be nasty, brutish, and short, or running headlong to their chains and forming inequality from, agriculture, I guess.
So it's pointless to say whether human nature is one thing or the other. All we know about human nature is that it will stay one thing or it will be determined by its environment. Like, what can we take away about human nature?
There is no such thing. It is only anecdotal evidence about human nature. You are a human, and you have the capacity to be anything you want to be. You can say there's such thing as chimpanzee nature, because whenever chimpanzee troops encounter each other, there is 100% of the time war involved. They will kidnap each other's babies and kill those babies, and kill the women, and children and men, and gang up on each other, and oftentimes just infighting and violence and horribleness. But in humans, that's not the case. You look at, there's in the Valley of Mexico in 1200, maybe earlier, probably 100% earlier, actually, around the time of Christ. There was a city called Teotihuacan, and it had everything you'd expect from a king-like, stratified civilization. You had monumental architecture, temple castes, priesthoods, violent sacrifice, and all of a sudden, but with no explanation, all of the monumental architecture is defaced, everything is ruined, and everyone starts living in palaces. And you might ask, why was this? And the archaeologists were digging up some of these palaces. They were like, oh, these are certainly kingly abodes. But then they realized just about everyone in the city was living in these well-sanitized villas with subfloor drainage and excellent arboretums and gardens and porches and yards and everything like that. And, that just goes to show you how creative and imaginative humans can be. And the same thing in the early cities of Harappa, the Indus River Valley civilization, where you have nothing on the order of hierarchy. You just have people who decide to come together and create giant cities with organized, standardized brick sizes. And that's important for a lot of reasons archaeologically, but it's just simple to say that, they had forethought and they had imagination and they had conscious political experimentation. And to say that there's human nature is reductive and boring and doesn't actually represent what we see in the archaeological or ethnographic record.
I mean, Charlie, you talked about, hey, we've lived under the same kind of not formation almost of humans, of like we are inherently hierarchical in today's society, and that's something that will continue to that's a social structure that will continue to proliferate itself, right?
Sort of. I think that, from, I want to say like Imperial Rome, like up until today, it's been relatively the same looking. I don't know, just kind of boring. There's been less stuff going on, in terms of political experimentation, at least in what we would call the conscious of civilization as in the Western view of things, and same thing with China and India. I mean, it's pretty much been static for a long time because of, various reasons, and I don't even know why, But I mean, if you look at history, like nothing really changed after the fall of Rome. There was a big opportunity to change things up, but they didn't. They just went back to kings and they went to whatever happened.
Yeah.
Which
Okay.
Spawned nation states.
Fair enough. Well, you heard it here, folks. Human nature does not exist. To try and produce one is folly.
Indeed. Well, thank you for tuning in to School of Athens, which this has been. I've been Carter Otis.
I have been Charlie Scales.
He has been, and I have been Aavik Wadivkar. This has been our shortest episode to date. I believe we talked about what we needed to talk about, and we got it. And we are, if nothing else, extremely efficient and good at our job.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you next week. This is 90.5 FM, WPEA, Exeter. We'll see you soon.